All right, to the money desk now. Of course, we have our business editor, Devin Murrigan. And Devin, of course, yesterday, diesel also going up along with petrol. I know that it wasn't such a big jump, but I see that business is reporting some staggering numbers when it comes to how much it's costing them to actually keep business going.
In the power cuts, of course.
Yeah.
And what's happening is that you have these major players in the economy telling us that they are spending millions on diesel. Remember Astral, the poultry producer, telling us, what, R1 million a day on diesel. ShopRite coming out yesterday with a trading update, putting a figure like R500 million on diesel. And you ask yourself, at what point does it, go down the value chain and hit us? So real empirical evidence now that, you have this impact of power cuts going into the finances. And we start there, as we said, rising input costs and power cuts are pulling down the returns at major South African retailers. Now, this week, ShopRite said it spent, as I said, more than R500 million on diesel in the second half of last year. This to fuel generators during these blackouts. At the same time, the retail giant reporting hiking prices by 9% in that period. Analysts say similarly high numbers for selling price hikes from the likes of Spar and Pick n Pay will come through shortly. Let's bring in Chris Gilmour, retail analyst. He joins us from Lisbon in Portugal. Chris, thanks indeed for joining us. I suppose what has eyebrows raising now, as I alluded to just a few seconds ago, is that you're starting to see how this enormous spend on diesel creep into the price of items in these stores. I mean, is there now a more definitive link that, Eskom's power cuts are rising prices at the end game?
Devin, yes, absolutely. When you were experiencing the likes of stage 1 and 2, it wasn't so bad. You could absorb an awful lot of it. But now that you're in the stages of 4, 5, 6, and every single day, it's really, really bad. So let's take a company like Woolies Foods. They have a tolerance which is very, very low. They have to get their food off the trucks and into their stores, and they have something like half a degree of tolerance. If they get outside of that tolerance, they have to scrap the food. Mm-hmm. And the other food suppliers are not quite as high as that, but nevertheless, it's still, when it comes to refrigeration, the kind of costs that are involved in diesel, and you've alluded to this, are absolutely massive. And if Eskom cannot supply the energy, they have to get it from somewhere else. So it is now becoming a real problem. As I say, if you're going through the entire year with every single day in load shedding, then it's going to be a real issue. It's going to be an issue for retailers. It's going to be an issue for farmers. It's going to be an issue for miners. You name it, across the spectrum, wherever you look.
And Chris, I mean, therein lies the problem when you look at that entire value chain, right? We've spoken about the retailer and the likes of ShopRite paying those staggering figures. And then there's farmers in that value chain. They're fighting not to pass the costs on of what they're spending on diesel. But it boils down to a very important aspect that investors are looking at. And that is, this is a simple illustration of how the cost of doing business in the country starts staggering for reasons that possibly we could have stopped, and that doesn't do too well to investment image, does it?
No, absolutely. I mean, Eskom has got an installed capacity of around about 45,000 megawatts. It's currently only able to supply, because of breakdowns and the like, about 25,000. It's working at around about half. You can't actually run a sophisticated economy like South Africa's at these kind of levels. And, so let's take the farmer, for example. The farmer has to do a certain amount of irrigation of the crops at certain times of the day. You can't just willy-nilly do it at midnight or some other arbitrary time of the day. It has to be at certain times of the day. Otherwise, it's relatively useless. So if you can't have that certainty, you may as well not bother with it at all, frankly. Cane growers, in KZN, so many areas. And I think South Africa may be unique in this regard as being such a highly what's the word I'm looking for? There are very few countries in the world where you've just got one supplier, basically. And therein lies the problem, one state-owned supplier. In many countries around the world, you have a variety of suppliers. So if one goes off, if one goes down, then you can pretty much pull on the resources of other suppliers, but not in South Africa. No, you've got this totally integrated approach.
Yeah. Now, I mean, and the reason why I started off with this interview and picked your brain on this one, Chris, is because at the end of the day, you've got your Woolworths customer, you've got your Spar customer, ShopRite as well, and we're fighting this thing called inflation. There's signs now that inflation has peaked and we might be dipping downwards. But what worries me is that on the other end of the spectrum, you have this diesel price going up to counter power cuts. I'm wondering whether or not we might just see inflation stubbornly sticking around this high for longer as a direct result of this diesel thing. What's your take?
It's a very good point. And if you watched the governor of the Reserve Bank last week, he kind of, without being, without expressly mentioning this, he kind of alluded to this. With the kind of the stickiness of inflation, it's difficult to see how you can really get it down. There's no real demand pull inflation in South Africa. It's not caused by excess demand. However, as you rightly point out, the actual cost of doing business in South Africa is creeping up significantly. And this is an area that you don't have in most other countries in the world. You don't have this ridiculous situation with an Eskom or Eskom equivalent. So you don't have this in the UK, for example. You don't have it in Europe. You don't have it in the US, where you've got a producer who cannot actually provide electricity, and as a result, you're pushing up the price at ridiculous levels. I mean, you look at the kind of price increases that Eskom is trying to get through NERSA. I mean, these are crazy price increases they're looking for as well. So inflation, wherever you look, and in terms of administered prices coming through from Eskom, is horrendous.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Well, thanks very much indeed for the insights. Chris Gilmour, a retail analyst there, speaking to us from Portugal at the moment.